GOP's first 2024 presidential debate united by a tough-on-China agenda. How would the 8 candidates tackle Washington's engagement with Beijing? Protests erupt in northern China, with angered citizens demanding compensation after flooding wrought havoc on the area. They say officials released floodwater without notice and caused even more damage. America's largest professional networking platform infiltrated by Chinese spies. Western intelligence agencies say agents for Beijing used LinkedIn to uncover UK state secrets. In China, dumping $10 billion into global infrastructure as experts warn about the ambitions behind the development fund. What do you think? Let us know below and subscribe if you haven't already. Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Before we dive into today's news, make sure to use the link below to subscribe to our newsletter. Each week, we round up the highlights and controversies happening around China and the world and share an exclusive behind-the-scenes snapshot with our readers. Keep an eye out. The newsletter will land in your inbox Friday morning. Republican candidates going toe-to-toe in the first GOP debate last night. The 8 candidates vowing to be tough on China, mentioning topics from fentanyl to energy and Ukraine. Former Vice President Mike Pence referred to China only once, calling for greater U.S. support for Ukraine to deter Beijing's potential aggression towards Taiwan. North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum was the only candidate to reference China in his closing remarks, saying, quote, "The way we win the Cold War with China is by growing our economy and through innovation." Well, absent from the debate, former President Trump still dominated, doing his own separate interview with former Fox News host Tucker Carlson. Trump did not hold back when it came to China issues, calling President Biden compromised, going as far as to call Biden a, quote, Manchurian candidate, pointing to his family business dealings with China. That's in light of the recent IRS whistleblower Gary Shapley, who says Hunter Biden threatened a Chinese businessman that he would use his father's position to ensure, quote, promises and assurances were kept. As for how to deal with China, Trump recently proposed new tariffs on all foreign imports. The White House responding, saying such a ban would hurt America's working families, damage the economy, and fuel inflation. Trump has also called for the U.S. to end permanent normal trade relations with China. And he's not alone. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley echoed those calls. The world's largest professional networking platform has become a handy tool for a Chinese spy. Western security agencies say he used LinkedIn to get a hold of thousands of British officials and lured them into handing over state secrets. The spy's main alias is Robin Zhang. This is according to an investigation by British news outlet The Times. Who's on Zhang's target list? Security officials, civil servants, and academics. In short, those with access to classified information or commercially sensitive technology. How does the alleged scheme work? Zhang first reaches out to targets by posing as a recruiter on LinkedIn. He then asks them to write reports within their areas of expertise. After that, Zhang asks targets for secret information to prove their credibility. Once that goes through, he invites them on trips to China, often to give speeches or for other business opportunities. After the targets arrive, he uses dinners or deals to encourage them to hand over sensitive information. If those soft tactics don't work, he may try to blackmail targets. The UK says it's on high alert about China's interest in the country. A report from the UK Parliament's intelligence watchdog said the country is of significant interest to China because of the UK's close relations with the US. It sits just below China's top priority targets. China is in the red zone. That's the message from the commander of the U.S. Southern Command. The comment last Friday drew attention to China's Belt and Road Initiative and how infrastructure projects under it could quickly switch gears to serve military purposes. Southcom General Laura Richardson called up Beijing's construction projects in South and Central America as examples, saying, quote, "They are on the 20-yard line to our homeland," adding they're on the first or second island chain to our homeland. China's controversial Belt and Road Initiative offers loans to smaller, less developed nations, used for building seaports and other critical projects. Often dubbed as China's debt trap diplomacy, Western nations accuse the Belt and Road of saddling recipients with mountains of debt. Later, when they become unable to repay China, Beijing takes control of the infrastructure in exchange and inches closer to Washington's doorstep. But there's more, with Richardson and other officials warning that China could use the Belt and Road to set up future military bases in the Western Hemisphere, though it doesn't have any yet. China's embassy in Washington has brushed off those concerns as lies and slander. Richardson highlighted Chinese-controlled deep-water seaports in Panama and Chile, plus 5G telecom gear in South and Central America, saying the U.S. is getting outcompeted by the Chinese right now, and that Washington must be able to offer alternatives to China for Latin America. Angry flood victims protesting in front of a state council building in northern China. They took to the streets over disaster compensation money, which many say is severely lacking. Let's take a closer look at what's happening.
This is the scene in northern China, outside the state council building of Buzhou City. Thousands of protesters gathered outside, voicing upset with the way local authorities addressed the area's recent flood. The majority took issue with the damage compensation provided, which totaled around $137 US. One report suggested that the figure would cover just 1% of their losses. The protest started out non-violent, but public anger rose, with some protesters smashing the building's glass walls. Inside, a banner hanging in the lobby read, "Serve the people." Similar unrest has popped up across the country, with some incidents ending with aggressive police tactics against demonstrators, including the use of pepper spray. Flood survivors are facing food shortages and urgent financial challenges following the flood disaster.
Facing a major debt crisis at home, China is dumping billions of dollars abroad. But what's motivating the investment? On Thursday, the Chinese regime leader Xi Jinping pledged to launch a special fund to bolster the global development.
China's financial institutions will soon launch a special fund of $10 billion.
Xi announced the plan on the final day of the BRICS summit in South Africa. The group is made up of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. The news comes as China is facing some of the worst economic hardship since the Communist Party took power in 1949. So the huge funding promise is raising eyebrows. China's main plan is to invite African countries to join a special project, China's Belt and Road Initiative, which sets its sights on the continent years ago. But the project faces major criticism from the West. China economic analyst Antonio Graceffo warns of another aspect, buying votes.
These countries that are heavily in debt to China will also vote with China in the UN.
Those concerns come as the BRICS organization announces plans to expand, adding 6 new members to its ranks. China's property woes now spreading to trophy office buildings. In the nation's financial hub, Shanghai, about 19% of the most exclusive office space is empty. A British real estate firm reports that more tenants in Shanghai's office buildings are now terminating leases than signing them, for the first time since 2015. Office vacancies are also rising in China's other top-tier cities, including Beijing, Guangzhou, and Shenzhen. In Beijing, office vacancy rates there have hit a 13-year high, with rental prices for office buildings dropping about 20%, their lowest since 2012. In a January video shared online, a secondhand office supplies dealer said his stock was piling up.
Beijing's full of bankrupt firms. I've got heaps of office supplies to handle, thousands of sets at once. This building is a total ghost town.
A Beijing resident told Hong Kong Economic Times that in 2020, office buildings in Beijing stayed lit until 9 p.m. but now large lit spaces are rare. An industry veteran told NTD that this year's office rental market looks grim, describing just 2 or 3 groups of customers per month, with almost all deals now being inked at reduced prices. Now we zoom in on the Korean peninsula. On Thursday, alarms blared in Japan as North Korea launched a new rocket. But it ended in Pyongyang's second failure to put a spy satellite in space. That's just days after the U.S., South Korea, and Japan agreed to better tackle North Korea's missile threat. Beijing criticized that agreement, saying it would increase the risk of confrontation. Here's more.
Thursday was the North's second failure in 3 months. However, the North's space agency vowed on Thursday to try to launch the satellite again in October. The nuclear-armed country wants to place what would be its first military intelligence satellite into orbit, saying it eventually plans for a fleet of satellites to monitor moves by U.S. and South Korean troops. Thursday's failure comes less than a week after U.S. President Joe Biden met the leaders of South Korea and Japan at Camp David, the presidential retreat, where they agreed to look into conducting joint military exercises to tackle challenges that include North Korea's nuclear and missile threats. And on Monday, the U.S. and South Korea kicked off a 10-day joint military drill known as Uchi Freedom Shield, which the North called a rehearsal for nuclear war. South Korea's Foreign Minister Park Jin and his U.S. and Japan counterparts on Thursday strongly condemned North Korea's rocket launch, which they said was a ballistic missile designed as a space rocket. The South's foreign ministry said that the ministers agreed during a phone call to consider unilateral sanctions in response to Thursday's launch.
Another big story to look out for: 81 bills across 33 American states, all introduced this year to restrict Chinese purchases of land near U.S. military bases. Stay tuned for more coming up tomorrow on China in Focus. That's all for today's China in Focus on YouTube. We're now sharing a shortened version of our program here after being demonetized for 2 years. Here's what to look out for in our second half: a deconstruction of the first GOP debate, 8 Republican candidates eager to prove they're not soft on China. How would they handle Washington's engagement with Beijing if elected? We sat down with Gregory Copley, president of the International Strategic Studies Association, for details. The full episode is available on our partner platform, Epic TV. To sign up, click the link down below. Thanks for watching China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. See you tomorrow.